You walk into a room. There's a table, 2 chairs, a board game between them, and a stranger you've just met sitting across from you. Someone flips a coin. Heads, you're rich. Tails, you're not. It lands. You watch the researcher slide twice as much money across the table to the other player. Twice the starting cash. 2 dice instead of 1. So he moves faster, lands on more squares, builds faster. Every time he passes a certain point on the board, he collects 200. You collect 100. Here's what nobody tells you walking in. The game was rigged before either of you sat down. And here's the part that should bother you. Watch what happens in the next 15 minutes. The rich player doesn't just win. He starts to change. He moves his pieces harder, slams them down, laughs louder, eats more from the bowl of pretzels sitting off to the side, even though nobody said the pretzels were part of the game. He starts commenting on the other player's bad luck, like it's a character flaw. And when the game ends, when the researcher asks him why he won, he doesn't mention the coin flip. Not once. He talks about strategy, about decisions, about playing it smart. He forgot the coin flip happened in the first 4 minutes. We'll come back to this room. You'll find out exactly which experiment this is, who ran it, and why psychologists have spent over a decade watching it happen again and again with different people and the exact same result. But not yet, because here's the thing this experiment quietly proves, and it's the thing this entire video is actually about. This is not a story about luck. This is not a story about talent. This is not a story about who deserved to win and who didn't. This is a story about something stranger. The fact that once someone hands you an advantage, your brain starts erasing the memory of ever having received it. And if that's true in a 15-minute board game with fake money, stay with me. What does it do to us over an entire lifetime? With real money, real inheritances, real zip codes we were born into before we could talk. What does 40 years of forgetting the coin flip do to a person? What does it do to a country? That's what we're going to find out. Elena is 34. She works 2 jobs, mornings at a clinic, nights at a call center, and she still can't make the math work. Rent went up again in January. Her car needs a part she can't afford yet. And every single month, when the numbers don't add up, she does the same thing millions of people do. She blames herself. Not the rent. Not the wages that haven't moved in 6 years. Herself. She tells her sister she just needs to budget better. Cut the coffee. Stop ordering in. As if the $4 she's not spending on coffee is the reason she can't get ahead, and not the $7,000 a year her landlord decided to take instead. Now picture Marcus, 31, works at a hedge fund in Manhattan, pulls in more in a month than Elena sees in 2 years. Marcus believes, genuinely, that he earned every dollar of it. And in one sense, he's not wrong. He works long hours, he's sharp, he reads the market well. What he doesn't mention, because it genuinely doesn't occur to him to mention it, is that his parents paid for the internship that got him in the door. That the internship was unpaid, which meant only kids whose parents could cover rent in Manhattan for a summer could even take it. That his first year's rent came from a family loan nobody calls a loan. Ask Marcus why he succeeded, and he'll give you a story about grit. He won't give you a story about the coin flip. Here's what most people miss when they look at these 2 lives side by side. Elena and Marcus are both doing the exact same thing. They're both explaining a financial outcome by looking at the person instead of the system the person is standing inside of. Elena blames her coffee habit. Marcus credits his work ethic. Different verdicts, same courtroom. And the courtroom never once asks about rent control, inheritance law, or which neighborhood either of them was born into. There's actually a name for this. Psychologists call it the I-frame bias, short for individual frame. It's your brain's default setting for explaining why things happen to people. Look at the person first, ask about their choices, their discipline, their talent. It's not a moral failing. It's not stupidity. It's just how human social cognition evolved. In small tribes where almost everything that happened to you really did trace back to a person you could see and evaluate. Your brain got very, very good at reading individuals. It never evolved to read a tax code. And this is where it gets remarkable, because the opposite of the I-frame has a name too. Researchers call it the S-frame, the system frame. It's the lens that asks a completely different question. Not what did this person do, but what set of rules, laws, and inherited advantages shaped what this person was even able to do. Most of us are fluent in I-frame thinking and almost illiterate in S-frame thinking. We didn't choose that. Nobody sat us down and taught us to see systems. We just never got the lesson. That gap between the two, between the story about the person and the story about the system, is where this entire video lives. And it's bigger, stranger, and far more consequential than a game of chance around a kitchen table. So let's just sit with that for a second. Two people, two totally different financial lives, and both of them running the exact same mental program without knowing it. One blaming herself for rent she didn't set. One crediting himself for a door somebody else opened. That's the I-frame bias in action, quiet, automatic, and running in the background of basically every conversation you've ever had about money. If that idea is new to you, it's worth sticking around, because we're about to look at where this bias actually comes from, who benefits from you never questioning it, and what happens when we finally follow it all the way back to that room with the rig board game. If any of this is landing, hit subscribe and drop a comment telling me whether you related more to Elena or to Marcus. I want to know, because it's about to get a lot stranger. Most of us grew up believing that if you work hard, you get ahead, and honestly, that's not an unreasonable thing to believe. Effort really does matter. The person who studies for the exam does better than the person who doesn't. The founder who works nights and weekends often does build something the founder who doesn't work nights and weekends never builds. None of that is a myth. People who tell you effort means nothing are lying to you just as much as the people who tell you it's the only thing that matters. But here's the part that gets left out of that story almost every single time. Take David, 19 years old, drops out of college, builds an app in his bedroom, sells it 4 years later for 11 figures. The headlines write themselves. Self-made, proof that anyone can do it, further evidence that hard work beats everything. And David did work hard. That part's real. What's missing from the headline is that David's parents covered his rent for those 4 years, so he never had to get a job. What's missing is the $40,000 his uncle wired him to keep the servers running when he ran out of runway. What's missing is that David went to a high school with a computer science program most public schools in this country don't have a budget for. None of that shows up in the headline, because headlines are built entirely out of I-frame language. Grit, vision, hustle. Nobody writes a headline that says, had a financial safety net most people in his own country will never have access to. This is not a story about David lying. This is not a story about David being ungrateful. This is not a story about villains hoarding the good fortune for themselves. This is a story about a system so good at hiding itself that even the person benefiting from it can't see it running. Here's the part nobody tells you. The coin flip doesn't feel like a coin flip from the inside. It just feels like your life. And this is where the numbers stop being abstract. Economist Thomas Piketty spent years studying something almost boring on paper. The rate at which wealth grows compared to the rate the overall economy grows. What he found was that money that's already invested, stocks, real estate, a portfolio sitting quietly in an account, tends to grow faster than wages do, year over year, decade over decade. It sounds small. It compounds into something enormous. Put plainly, $1 sitting in stocks or property tends to roughly double itself every couple of decades, all on its own, whether the owner lifts a finger or not. $1 that's already working for you in the market multiplies. $1 you're earning from a paycheck just replaces the one you spent last month. It doesn't sit anywhere long enough to double. Over 1 year, that gap is nothing. Over one lifetime, it's the difference between David's family and Elena's. Over 3 generations, it's the difference between owning the building and paying rent to whoever does. And here's the part that should really stop you. This isn't a glitch in the system. Nobody needs to sabotage anyone for this to happen. The system doesn't need a villain twirling a mustache in a boardroom somewhere deciding to keep people poor. It just needs everyone to keep believing the I-frame story, that David earned it, that Elena didn't try hard enough. Because as long as we're all busy grading individuals, nobody's checking the rules of the board. So let's go back to that room. The game was Monopoly. The experiment was run by a social psychologist named Piff at UC Berkeley, and it wasn't a one-time thing. He ran it over and over with different pairs of strangers and got the same result almost every time. Rig the coin flip, hand one player double the money and double the dice. And within 15 minutes, you can watch a person's entire personality shift. They talk louder. They take up more space at the table. Piff's team even tracked something almost comic. The rich players ate more pretzels from a bowl that had nothing to do with the game, like winning at a rig board game made them feel entitled to snacks that weren't even part of the prize. And then, every time when asked to explain their win, they left out the coin flip. Every time. Here's why that matters far beyond a board game. In 2008, something close to that same experiment played out with real money at the scale of an entire country. Financial institutions had spent years handing out home loans to people who were never going to be able to pay them back, then bundling thousands of those loans together and selling them to investors as if the bundle itself made them safe. When it collapsed, the people who built and profited from that stacked deck were largely bailed out. Meanwhile, millions of ordinary homeowners, people who'd been told for years that a mortgage was the responsible adult thing to do, lost their houses, and the story that got told about them wasn't the system was rigged. It was they borrowed more than they could afford. I-frame language applied to an entire national crisis. Blame the players. Don't check the board. And here's where this stops being an abstract argument about fairness and becomes something you can measure in years of someone's actual life. Recent research tracking Americans by income found that the richest people in this country live, on average, 9 to 15 years longer than the poorest. 15 years. For comparison, public health researchers estimate that curing every form of cancer on Earth tomorrow would add about 3 years to average life expectancy. 15 years of difference, just from where you land on the income ladder, is roughly 5 times bigger than eliminating cancer entirely. That's not a metaphor. That's not a board game with fake money anymore. That's how long you get to know your grandchildren. That's whether you're alive for your own retirement. The coin flip in that Monopoly game wasn't really about money. It was never really about money. It was about who gets to forget that a flip happened at all, and who has to live every single day carrying the weight of a game they never agreed to play. So here's what to actually carry out of this one. First, the fact. The richest people in this country live, on average, up to 15 years longer than the poorest, and that gap traces back to policy and inheritance, not personal discipline. Second, what that means for you. The next time you catch yourself explaining someone's financial situation, yours or someone else's, in a single sentence about effort or laziness, pause. Ask the S-frame question instead. Not what did they do, but what board were they handed? You don't have to abandon the idea that effort matters. You just have to stop letting it be the only question you ask. Third, and this is the one that actually stays with you, the coin flip already happened. For all of us. Years ago, in ways none of us chose. The only real choice left is whether you spend your life pretending it didn't, or whether you're honest enough to notice it, in yourself and in the people you're quick to judge. So here's my question for you, and I actually want an answer in the comments. When you look back at your own life, what's one advantage you were handed that you almost forgot to count? Not something you're ashamed of, just something you didn't build. A parent who could co-sign a loan. A neighborhood with a good school. A safety net you never had to use, but knew was there. Because the people who change the story aren't the ones who feel guilty about their coin flip. They're the ones who remember it happened at all.